Good morning, everyone. Time to begin our study. We're going to be looking at the life of King Josiah and, Lord willing, moving into the prophecy in Habakkuk. All right. So, we're in the topic of King Josiah, a pretty popular character in the Old Testament, just judging by how many people name their children after him these days. We've got one in the Flowers family, one in the Hudson family, and I was actually thinking about it. There's actually two in our family. There's one in my sister's family, as well as Bonnie's brother named his firstborn Josiah. Why is that? That's because he was a very admirable character in our Old Testaments. As far as the kings of Judah go, he is praised as one who there was no one like him before and no one like him after. Just a remarkable king. Very similar things said about Josiah as were said about Hezekiah, who was just a few generations before. Just great reformers in a very wicked land. The other thing I wanted us to notice, and we'll flip quickly through this timeline we talked about in more detail last week, I just wanted you to notice kind of where King Josiah falls. And it's the last king of Judah alone, because we're moving into the captivity with these next four kings, these sons of Josiah with Jehoahaz, Jehoiakim, Jehoiachin, and finally Zedekiah. Those last four kings are starting down the stair step into Babylon, because that first deportation begins in 605 when Daniel and the other nobles are going to be carried off. And so Josiah, who dies in 609 BC, is essentially that last thing. You don't want to presume to know the mind of God, but we do have the prophecy of Huldah that we'll talk about today, where she says that you're not going to see the destruction. And so, but you almost see that once Josiah has died, now God begins the punishment on the people. And so he dies, and we'll talk about the Battle of Carchemish just a little bit as we get time. And then this punishment of Judah, punishment of God's own people, begins for their own sins. But let's talk about the good that he did, even though it does seem to be too late for Judah. We talked about question 1 already in last week's lesson. Question 2, what reformations did he make, this now being the 12th year of his reign? So how old does that make him? 20 years old. He began to seek the Lord when he was 16, and then these reformations begin now in his 12th year. He's 20 years old. He's only going to live to be 39. Never sees his 40th birthday. But he's now in the 12th year of his reign, and he begins making reforms. So 2 Chronicles 34 gives some detail, but there's also quite a bit more in the 2 Kings texts. So what kind of reforms was he making?
Well,
yes, sir.
It says he took down the high places, he broke down and burned and destroyed all the idols, both wooden and carved, broke molded images in pieces, burned bones of the idolatrous priests.
Pretty extensive. What else do you notice that shows that this was a very extensive and thorough reform? What was it about Judah and Jerusalem?
Cleansed it.
He cleansed Judah and Jerusalem. Was it just Judah and Jerusalem? Norm?
He went far afield.
He went pretty far north. What were the other tribes, territories that he lists?
Simeon, Naphtali, Manasseh.
Manasseh, Ephraim, Simeon, and Naphtali. The furthest north of those would be Naphtali. Remember what that territory becomes? Zebulun and Naphtali was called Galilee of the Gentiles. So he's going all the way up to the Sea of Galilee in his reforms. Very thorough. And of course, when you think about these high places that have been set up to worship Jehovah, but also to worship idols, they're going to be, as it was described in the prophets, on every high hill, under every green tree, just pervasive throughout the land. And so he's going all throughout. What were some of the specific kings that he mentioned who had set up some of the things that he was tearing down? Some of them are obvious. Some of them are a bit of a surprise. Kiara?
In general, at least in 2 Kings 23, they mention either the kings of Judah or Israel, but a couple of names that I have found were Manasseh, Jeroboam, and even Solomon in verse 13.
Yes, 2 Kings 23 is where he lists some of these things. Solomon, what does that tell you if he's having to tear down something that Solomon erected? It goes back to the days of the United Kingdom, and we should take note that, he was the first step departing from wholehearted worship of Jehovah. Remember, why did Solomon compromise? He had all these wives. So he's setting up these things for them, right? It's not so much for him, but this is to keep the wives happy. They'd like to have the worship of their home gods, in a more convenient place. And so, 2 Kings 23, verse 13, that he has to destroy the high places which were before Jerusalem, which were on the right of the mount of destruction which Solomon, the king of Israel, had built for Ashtoreth, the abomination of the Sidonians, and for Chemosh, the abomination of Moab, and for Milcom, the abomination of the sons of Ammon. So he's having to do that. What's that also tell you about all the kings in between? There was still something standing. And so, you see Hezekiah's reforms were very thorough. You see a few others who were good kings and trying to get rid of some of these things. Maybe Uzziah stands out. Why might they have left some of this stuff? Norm? Tradition? Maybe some level of respect for Solomon, right? Great king, maybe the greatest in some respects, author of Scripture, godly man in many ways, but just human reasoning, right? We're making supposition here on why they didn't, but it's like if you're going far to destroy these innovations elsewhere, what about the ones that are right here at home? It should be obvious, but it was not until the days of Josiah that these things were torn down. Puts
him on a whole nother level then.
Yes.
We're bringing up Hezekiah, and so much good is said about him.
Yeah.
But Josiah's being the most thorough.
The most thorough, yeah. Exactly. And then you mentioned Manasseh, Ahaz, perhaps Solomon. Who else? Maybe the more obvious one. What other kings' abominations did he go tear down? Manasseh was mentioned, yes, but Jeroboam's the one I was thinking of that I hadn't heard us mention yet. So Jeroboam, all the way through this divided kingdom period, they would talk about, but they did not forsake the sin of Jeroboam. What was the sin of Jeroboam, that first Jeroboam? Right. He set up these golden calves in the northern 10 tribes so that they wouldn't go to Jerusalem. He was afraid he would lose the hearts of the people if they go to Jerusalem. They would start serving the king in Jerusalem. So he sets up Bethel and Dan south and north so that they have convenient places to worship. And so Josiah goes and destroys that. So question 3 was looking at this prophecy that's now fulfilled. If you're in 2 Kings 23, there's a lot of flipping. Got to do a lot of flipping in this lesson today. 2 Kings 23, verse 15 really. The altar that was in Bethel and the high place which Jeroboam the son of Nebat, who made Israel sin, had made, even that altar and the high place he broke down. Then he demolished its stones, ground them to dust, and burned the Asherah. Now when Josiah turned, verse 16, he saw the graves that were there on the mountain, and he sent and took the bones from the graves and burned them on the altar and defiled it according to the word of the Lord, which the man of God proclaimed, who proclaimed these things. You almost miss that detail as you're reading through with all the reforms. It's like, what's he referring to here? Who's this man of God who proclaimed these things? Well, hopefully your Bible has some chain references. Mine does, and if you look in the margin, it says, well, that's from 1 Kings 13, verse 2. And so I had you look back at that. So when was this prophecy made? Way back in the days of Jeroboam. Interesting to me, and something that I think is worth trying to remember, that this prophecy, when you run across this prophecy, way back in 1 Kings 13:2, we're in the days of Jeroboam, so right at the pivot point between united kingdom and divided kingdom, because Jeroboam is the one who tears away those northern 10 tribes with God's blessing. And then Josiah is where? At the end of not only the divided kingdom, but Judah alone. And so this prophecy very much brackets this whole time period. As Jeroboam is committing the sin that's going to make Israel sin and never come back to the Lord, he's prophesying, or it's prophesied by this man of God who comes as he's worshiping on his brand new altar in Bethel. This man of God in 1 Kings 13:2 comes and prophesies. Notice the prophecy in 1 Kings 13:2. He says, behold, a son shall be born to the house of David, Josiah by name. Isn't that remarkable? Josiah by name. I can think of maybe one other prophecy in the New Testament or in the Old Testament that's that specific and that far in advance. Maybe in your Isaiah study, we talked about the Cyrus prophecy where he calls Cyrus by name, that he's going to set my captives free. We haven't even got to that fulfillment yet. But here, about how many years? As you're learning the timeline, how many years would you estimate between when this was prophesied and where we are?
Well, didn't Judah exist 100 or so years after Israel's captivity?
Yes.
And then we got to add on, going back to now.
Right. And we know Josiah's he's going to die in 609, right? So we're right in the 600 time frame. When did the kingdom divide? Do you have a ballpark number in your head for that? It's a simple number to remember for timeline purposes is that David was at 1000 BC, and Abraham was 2000. I try to remember the nice round numbers. Abraham 2000, David 1000. And so couple generations, couple 40-year reigns after that, you have the kingdom divided. It's 930 BC when Jeroboam and Rehoboam divide the kingdom, 930. So we're talking 300 years. This is a very significant prophecy to call Josiah by name, the very end of this period where they're going to be going into captivity. And he does exactly what's described here, where he takes the bones of the men who did these wicked things and burns their bones, puts those ashes on the altar. So it's great to see those things. It's evidence, it's proof that the Bible is true when God is able to do these miracles. A prophecy is a miracle that we can see. I never saw him open the eyes of the blind, but I can see that he prophesied something and then he fulfilled it much later in history. Question 4. What did the faithful men do? Now, as he's enacting his reforms, and he's also restoring the temple. So what did these faithful men do with the money that was being brought out of the temple? The money had been gathered in, even from these regions as far as Naphtali. Good, faithful men were now contributing to the temple, and they're bringing that money out, and what are they doing with it? Okay, they gave it to the men. So maybe that seems obvious, almost incidental. But I guess the implication there is sometimes that's not what was happening. It was either not being used or it was being misused, abused. And you certainly see a lot of condemnation in the prophets of these wicked priests and how they were making themselves fat and abusing the poor and not doing what they should with these funds. 2 Chronicles 34 is where you get that story if you wanted to flip over there. So they were putting the money into the hands of the workers. And then I just thought, hey, that's similar to what we do in the Lord's church. We gather in funds into the treasury. And what lesson should we take from that?
Be used for the work of the church.
It should be. Yeah, it's not just something that's good to have, to store up, to prepare for some future rainy day. We gather for the work that God has given us to do. And so that's important. It's important that a church has that mindset that we want to put these funds into the hands of the workers. That's for 2 Chronicles 34 and verse 10. They put it in the hands of the workmen. What else? Any other applications you would draw from that about the work of the church? What did it say about the workmen that they were giving it to? What qualities did they have?
They were honest.
They were honest, yes. They're doing the work faithfully. Is it important to give the Lord's money to faithful men? It should go without saying, but sometimes some diligence is required to ensure that you're giving the Lord's money to faithful men. We don't want to squander the Lord's funds and support someone who's doing harm in the kingdom or is wasting the Lord's money. And so it's important to understand that faithfulness is the requirement. It was interesting how it's stated over in 2 Kings 22, verse 7. It says, "Only no accounting shall be made with them for the money delivered into their hands, for they deal faithfully." They didn't even need to follow up because they were so convinced of these men's faithfulness, which had been observed, I'm sure. And so I see there an inverse relationship between accountability and faithfulness. If a man is faithful in his work, do I have to check up on him? No, I see, boy, he is just so faithful. I don't even need to ask him if something's done. It's just going to be done. But if a man is unfaithful in his work, there's going to be a whole lot more accountability effort. Did you do it? Did you do it? Is it done? What'd you do? Give me an account of all the money I sent you. I'd like to see where it all went. Because I'm not sure I trust you, right? But if a person has proven themselves trustworthy, you do what you need to do. I know that you're serving the Lord faithfully from all I've seen in the work that you do. So if we don't want to be checked up on, we need to be faithful. And maybe we'll get this same attitude from others. No, there's no need for accounting because you deal faithfully. It's a great example for us. All right, question 5, unless there's any hands. Question 5. So what did Hilkiah find? We've had this picture up on the screen for all these questions. This is the famous moment in the life of Josiah. What is it that Hilkiah found? He finds the book of the law. And he comes and gives it to Shaphan, and Shaphan reads it. So that's this picture. What was Josiah's reaction?
Tore his clothes.
He tore his clothes. Now, was this Josiah's only and first exposure to God's will? It's good to just understand the context of everything we've been reading. He knows quite a bit about what God wants, otherwise he couldn't have been making all these reforms. So there's some things that we know perhaps by what's been handed down to us. Maybe it's things that we just know by our conscience, that there is one God above and we shouldn't be worshiping these dumb idols. Some of those things God expected the Gentiles to know in their hearts, in their conscience, because it's reasonable. And so, yeah, he's been serving God to the best of his ability, but there's at least some of the law that he has never heard. And it was shocking to him. He tears his clothes. What do we know? Brother Waldron mentions, we don't know what part of the law was read to him, but it was probably it mentions the words of Moses, so maybe it's referring to those first 5 books, the Pentateuch. But from what Huldah says in 2 Chronicles 34:24, what does that kind of imply that he had heard now? Yep, she was prophesying that there's calamity coming, but what does she say about what had been read in the presence of the king? The curses. Yeah, it says, even all the curses written in the book which they have read in the presence of the king. So it's a pretty good supposition to go and look back at some of those curses and see what were some of the things he might have heard, and to remind ourselves kind of what some of that language was. So question 6 was to go look at Deuteronomy 28. It's a long section. We certainly don't have time to read it in class, but 15 through 68. By the way, the first 14 verses are the blessings, and they're bright, sunny, wonderful things. So he's going to bless your kneading bowl and your animals and your children and your entire life if you serve him. But the curses are very much the opposite. But he says a whole lot more about how bad these curses are going to be that come on you. What are some of the things, as you looked at that text, that kind of stood out? If you're putting yourself in Josiah's shoes, what might have caused you to tear your clothes? Jesse?
Verse 25 mentioned their enemies would defeat them. Verse 32, your children will be given to another people. Verse 36, will bring you and your king to another nation, and there you'll serve other gods. You couple that with Assyria what they already did to Israel, along with the prophecies of Jeremiah, who was at this time, right?
Yes.
So they're contemporary.
That's right. Yeah, some of those things, and it gets extremely dark. It talks about how they'd be starving, how the kingdoms would come and besiege them, and they'd be resorting to cannibalism just to get through the day. But yeah, was there something else?
43, aliens.
Verse 43.
Who among you shall rise higher and higher above you, and you shall come lower and lower.
And that's not the little green men, right? These are the strangers, right? The foreigners. The alien is the foreigner who rises higher and higher. Yeah, as you think about the history from here on out, is Judah going to be the top dog? No, it's going to be kingdom after kingdom after kingdom oppressing them. And they'll rise higher and higher till you get to the days of Jesus, and they're just under the yoke of Rome. And that's just part of life. If that Roman officer tells you to go 1 mile, you go with him too, right? You just submit. So they're not going to have their independence except for a brief period under the Maccabees. So yeah, that stood out to me as well. But yeah, I think Jesse mentioned the reference to your king. Look at, if you're in Deuteronomy 28, verse 36, the Lord will bring you and your king, whom you set over you, to a nation which neither you nor your fathers have known. Not to say that he's only worried about his own skin, but that sounds, that's a description of this. Did they have a king when Moses wrote this? No, well before the United Kingdom. But he knew he was prophesying a time when you have a king, and guess what? It doesn't matter. You and your king are going into exile together. And so Josiah must have been terrified. This could happen in my day. Maybe I'm that king who goes into exile. And of course, the atrocities that were going to happen to the people. So I wanted you to think about how that applies to us today. And I pointed you to Hebrews 10, 36 through 31. What impact should similar warnings have on us? Nor?
It should be things that cause us to occasionally, or maybe consistently, go back to and double check the warnings.
A double what?
Double check the warnings.
Oh, to double check the warnings, yeah.
Keep going back.
Yes.
What's the warning? Because if you get lax in warning labels, bad things happen, even in physical stuff. Like you forget this is caustic, you forget that that's flammable or that's explosive, and you put them around each other, and all of a sudden you're in a world of hurt.
Yeah.
So physically, we understand the necessity of reviewing the warning things that are around us.
And what's the warning in Hebrews 10?
Yeah.
It's pretty stern, isn't it? If you go on sinning willfully, there no longer remains a sacrifice for sins, but a terrifying expectation of judgment and the fury of a fire that will consume the adversaries. Verse 31, it's a terrifying thing to fall into the hands of the living God. We need to read that warning like Norm says and wake up. Are we just going on sinning willfully? Yeah, I worship God on the Lord's day, but then I go on sinning willfully. God knows our hearts. He knows our will. Are we choosing to do these things? Is it fair to even call them a mistake? Or was it on purpose? Was it willful? They're no longer, God's not got anything else that he could do for us because he's already done it all for us. There's no other sacrifice he could give us other than the sacrifice of Christ. So we've got to take warning. Recognize that allegory in the Old Testament. Anytime you start to doubt, God's such a loving God, I don't think he would really send me to hell. I don't think he would do that. Remember that the whole Old Testament is teaching us that he can do all these things to create a people for his own, and then when they reject him, what does he do? He casts them out. That's the God who we serve. And so this is an allegory. Sending his people into exile is the allegory for sending Christians to hell who are unwilling to serve him. You've been given all the blessings in Christ, and you still sin against him, so yes, he will cast you out too. And that should humble all of us. Yeah.
That's what we can take, like they did, I think, his mercy and his long suffering for granted and forget about there's an end to this long suffering. There's a wrath, like till there was no remedy.
Yeah.
Text.
Yeah, that's a good.
Kept sending those prophets.
Yeah, that's a great warning. Perhaps God has recognized there's no remedy for us. Wouldn't that be tragic to hear him say that of us? That's right. Yeah. There will be tares among with the wheat, and when the final judgment comes, they'll be sorted out. We don't want to be in that group that's sorted out by God in the last day. So what message did he receive from Huldah? So he's terrified, tears his clothes, and says, we need to find out, is this coming? Is this happening? So he goes to find out, he seeks the will of God, and there is a prophetess, Huldah. And what does she tell him? Yes, Shirley?
There have been calamity on this place and on the inhabitants of all the curse that you have done written in the book of the law, because you have broken me.
Okay, so the curses are coming. Absolutely. So this is in 2 Chronicles 34, 24 through 28, if you want to follow along in your Bibles. But yes, his question is are these curses coming? And the answer was yes. And it's because they had forsaken God. What's part 2 of that prophecy?
Obviously his penitent heart and his humbleness.
Yeah, you mentioned a penitent heart. How else is Josiah's heart described by God? Tender? A tender heart? How did his heart respond? What did it say?
For his foes he wept.
Yeah, it says you humbled yourself before God when you heard his words. That's the heart that God is looking for. When you heard his words, you humbled yourself. There was a time when Josiah had not heard his words, so he didn't know just how dire things were. Then when he heard God's words, he humbled himself. And so that's the heart. That's the good and honest heart. You know, in that parable of the sower, there's different hearts. And this is a good, honest heart. When I hear the truth, I'm honest and say, yeah, that's me. I need to change. That's honesty. And so he was willing to make those changes. And so there's good news in that it says, your eyes will not see all the evil that I will bring on this place. And so it's going to be after the death of Josiah that these things begin. And we talked about this question 8 a little bit last week. I wanted you to think about Josiah and Cornelius because I see that similarity. What do you notice that's similar between them in terms of how they act before and after they hear the word?
They both wanted to know the word,
Mm-hmm.
and then they tried to find out what the word was.
Yeah, Josiah began to seek the Lord at age 8. Oh, sorry, age 16, 8th year of his reign. And it wasn't until many years later that he gets the completed word, the completed message, similar in the life of Cornelius, right? He was a God-fearing man, giving alms and seeking the Lord. When he gets that message to send for Peter, how eager is he? He does it right away, gathers his family, says, we are all here to hear the word that the Lord has commanded to you. So he wants to hear the word, and when it's given to him, they obey. That's the heart that is, a kingdom heart, one who's ready to serve the Lord. It's a reflection of this idea of ask, and it will be given to you. Seek, and ye shall find. Knock, and the door will be opened to you. What's the expectation from God that everybody can do? No?
We do the first part. We can ask, we can seek, and we can knock.
Right.
God does the rest.
That's right. Everyone on this planet can do that we should seek him. He set eternity in their hearts so that they would seek him. Each one of us can use our eyes, just like Romans 1 describes, and see that this world had to have been created by someone, and we should be seeking him. And so, as we seek him, he will provide. He will allow those seekers to find him. Go ahead, Randy.
The other thing too, as far as seeking, they both sought the Lord in the right places. Josiah didn't seek false prophets. He followed the true prophets, and Cornelius saw it from Peter.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, seek the Lord while he may be found. Yep, so that's great examples for us. And I mentioned this last week, but as we are pursuing God, we do the things that we know to be right while we continue to learn the rest of what we need to do, right? Until we are able to serve him in perfection. And he's pleased, with those who diligently seek. All right, what does Josiah do to now encourage the people to turn back to God?
He read from the book of the law, and he stood in his place and made a covenant before the Lord to follow the Lord and keep his commandments.
That's right. He makes everybody else participate in this turning back to God. Sadly, I don't know if their hearts were in it, but he's making them do it, isn't he? 2 Chronicles 34:32. Moreover, he made all who were present in Jerusalem and Benjamin to stand with him as they're making this covenant to God. And it says, verse 33, that they did serve God throughout his lifetime. So this doesn't seem to have gotten into their hearts the way that it got into his. But at least while he's leading them, they're serving God. And then he institutes or restores the Passover. So very parallel to what other king? When was the last time we talked about a great Passover? Wasn't that in the days of Hezekiah?
I believe it was.
Correct me if I'm wrong, but I'm pretty sure there's a parallel here. It was in the days of Hezekiah where they were trying to get it together, and you couldn't even get everybody consecrated in time, so they celebrated it a month late with permission from God. But here, there's no mention of that, so they're doing it at the right time. What were some other things that stood out about that Passover? That was question 10.
Since the days of Samuel.
Yeah, it goes all the way back to the days of Samuel, since it had been done this well. What else? Anything else you wrote down for question 10?
Josiah and the leaders providing.
I hadn't mentioned that yet. Yeah, so you see maybe the poverty of the people and the charity of the leaders, that they're providing the lambs for everybody to sacrifice. Josiah himself contributing, but also some of his officers. What was mentioned about the Ark of the Covenant? This is 2 Chronicles 35, verse 3. Put the holy ark in the house which Solomon, the son of David, king of Israel, built. It will be a burden on your shoulders no longer. So we don't know exactly what they'd been doing with the ark, but it wasn't where God told them to put it. We'll get to Habakkuk here for 5 minutes or so, but it talks about the Lord is in his holy temple. Let all the earth keep silent before him. It's a famous line from Habakkuk. We sing that line. But that's where the Lord, that's the blessings of Israel. The blessings of Israel come because the Lord is in his holy temple. And here they are taking his throne, essentially with the ark, out of the temple. That was not authorized. And so they put it back. Just simple obedience. All right, so how did Josiah die? There's not much bad that can be said about Josiah, but his death is a bit of a shame in his life. As I mentioned, he never sees his 40th birthday. He's 39 years old when he dies, and how is it that comes about?
He was killed by Pharaoh Necho.
Killed by Pharaoh Necho. So an Egyptian king kills Josiah. We've mentioned this battle of Carchemish. This is Pharaoh Necho, by the way. It's interesting when the Bible mentions a name, right? We've seen quite a few pharaohs all the way back into the days of Moses, right? But they don't always give Pharaoh's name. Was that Pharaoh Amenhotep or Pharaoh Ramses or whoever? But here they give the name, and what's fascinating about this story is it's corroborated very well in history with artifacts and records from other kingdoms that, yeah, this is something that happened, this battle of Carchemish. And we've talked about how Assyria is coming to its end. Who's destroying Assyria? The Babylonians. They're coming from the east, right? And so what the Egyptians are doing in their calculations is, okay, do I want to face this new powerful Babylon, or would I rather just have a weakened Assyrian neighbor to my north? And they decide, I'd rather have a weakened Assyria. I can deal with them. That's the enemy I know. I don't know about this other one that I don't. And so Necho decides, I'm going up to Carchemish to help the Assyrians. And it wasn't just his idea. Where does he say he received this command? From God. So 2 Chronicles 35, verse 21, he's hurrying up to Carchemish, and he has to go through the promised land. So he passes through, and Josiah intercepts him and goes to war against him. Because Josiah is doing the math that, no, Assyria needs to fall. Who had prophesied that Assyria was going to fall? One of those minor prophets we studied 2 weeks ago, Nahum. And so Nahum had prophesied the end of Assyria, and was Judah going to be happy when Assyria falls? Oh yeah, they'd been a problem, and so he doesn't want anybody to help Assyria. They need to die. They need to fall, and so he's going against Necho. Necho's trying to help Assyria, and Necho says, "I've got a message from God. My war is not with you." He says, verse 21, God has ordered me to hurry. Stop for your own sake from interfering with God who is with me, so that he will not destroy you. And I can understand a little bit of Josiah's skepticism, like, since when does the Egyptian king know what Jehovah wants? But it says, verse 22, however, Josiah would not turn away from him, but disguised himself in order to make war with him. Nor did he listen to the words of Necho from the mouth of God, but came to make war on the plain of Megiddo. And so Josiah dies on the plain of Megiddo. He's hit by a stray arrow in his chariot, and they take him back to Jerusalem where he dies. In so doing, he slows down Necho, and the result is he doesn't get there in time. So the Assyrians needed reinforcements, and the Assyrians fall at Carchemish to the Babylonians because the Egyptians are late. I just think it's so fascinating how the historical records align so well with the scriptures, which makes perfect sense. God is in charge of both, but it says God told me to hurry, and Josiah slows him down. And then his historical records talk about how Necho just arrived too late. You see the working of God in the realm of mankind. It's all coming about to fulfill his purpose. Assyria is going to fall. Babylonian does rise up. And after the Battle of Carchemish, 609, Josiah dies, and they continue their march on down to Jerusalem. And by 605, they're deporting the Jews off into exile, just like God has commanded. This is actually a picture of Carchemish, as it was referred to in 2 Chronicles 35:20. It says, Necho, king of Egypt, came up to make war at Carchemish on the Euphrates. So here's a picture where you can see, they call them a tell, where it's a hill or a mound where the ancient ruins have now been covered with dirt and plants. But that mound there was the city of Carchemish right there on the Euphrates River. These things are real. These things are true. Builds our faith. Well, we have just a minute to turn over to Habakkuk, but we're going to delve into that next week. The book of Habakkuk is a prophecy that fits into this time period where they see that this Babylonian threat is on the horizon, and Habakkuk has some questions that he asks to God. We'll take a look at that in full detail next week. So we'll wrap there. Any questions before the bell rings? Norm? Comments?
Amazing comparison, not just between Josiah and Hezekiah, and the differences when they were told, hey, this isn't going to happen in your time. Bad things are going to happen. It's not going to happen in your time. Hezekiah was like, cool, that's awesome. And Josiah was like, maybe I can do something that changes mine. Like, is there anything and he just immediately dove into throwing his whole heart into getting the people in line with God. And Hezekiah was like, oh, cool, good, I want to see it.
That's a great point, Norm. I'd missed that. They both received that message that it wouldn't be in their day. But yeah, that's the noble response. We should be diligent to do all we can with whatever time we're given from God. All right.